Hello, Steve Arts 89. Well, I'm a huge Halloween fan, and every year I watch the Halloween films, but I tend to just leave them on while I'm just sort of doing other things. And I only half watch them, but this year I actually took the time to sit down and watch them all properly. And it sort of made me want to talk about them for a minute, because I just noticed things that I didn't notice before, I forgot, and I just want to do a bit of a review of each one. So this is a review of Halloween, the original 1978 version. Not to be mistaken with the other two Halloweens, titled Halloween. This one was actually released on the 25th of October in 1978, and it had a small release. It didn't pick up right away, got a lot of bad reviews, and it wasn't until I got a review from, I think, The Village Voice and then maybe Siskel and Ebert. They got 2 positive reviews in a row, then suddenly the critics turned and decided it was the next Psycho. And word of mouth, it just grew and spread, and eventually it made $70 million over quite a long time, but still it just stayed in the cinemas, and it made $70 million, which was the most successful independent film that had ever happened at that time. It was made on a budget of initially $300,000, but then when they got Donald Pleasance, they were given another $25,000 to pay for him. So I guess they didn't really have a budget for a star, but they got one when they actually got a star. So I think one of the reasons why this film is so popular, and why it's one of those films that gets looked at, I think, a lot in film courses and student studies, because it was almost like a student film. It was just guerrilla filmmaking. It was someone who'd just come out of film school who'd only made 2 films. One he spun out of a project I think he did for school. And it just I think there's 2 sides of it. One is looking at the design of it, and it has a very teachable film school sort of aesthetic to it, where Carpenter sort of came from the film school sort of mind. And it's very effective, but it's also very easy to sort of analyse. Whereas the other element was the fact that it was such a little group of people working on it together, that they sort of had a family sort of feeling when it was all them against the world, not like dealing with the studio and all the different corporate heads and all the cooks all the chefs in the kitchen. They didn't have that problem. It was John Carpenter managing to get complete creative control and final cut on this film, because they were going to do it for such low money. Like, well, if you can do it for $300,000, you can have whatever, we'll give you whatever you want. So that's sort of the production side of it that is sort of legendary. The fact that actually, I think it was Irwin Yablans approached Carpenter to make a film, because they had met and that. And he came up with the idea of Halloween and that, because it was originally just about babysitters. And then they really just, they didn't have any expectations. They didn't have anything to lose. And there's just something about, I guess it's the legend of the film seems to carry on as much as the artistry and the success, because every Halloween it sort of gets brought up. It's like a traditional thing now. But the film itself is very simple. It's just, and it changed. It became more complicated when the sequel was made. But the original film was really just about a babysitter being stalked by the boogeyman, and it was very arbitrary, and sort of the idea was the killer was more a force of nature than a person. He was just the shape. He didn't have the normal sort of human qualities of like a stalker or serial killer or someone after revenge or something. It was fairly arbitrary, where he just saw this girl and just decided to stalk her, and he plays a lot of games, a lot of trick-or-treating, a lot of tricks, and the style works, I think, the most for the film. They went more for suspense and building up fear in a scene, because they didn't have the money for the effects. They couldn't have gore. They couldn't do that. And I think that's the way Carpenter would have done it initially anyway. The gore that came in the later films, like the second film, was more an insecurity about competing with other slashers that had come up since they had done the original Halloween. But I do love the film. It is, like I said, very simple and very believable. You believe the characters, and you get time with them, and you get invested with them, and you root for them, and you don't want them to actually be killed. Unlike a lot of future films where you don't spend any time, like they get straight into kills, you don't spend any time with the characters, and you don't really care about them, because especially as a franchise goes along, like a serial killer franchise, like a horror franchise, people associate the franchises with the villain, and they're more about the villain and not the victims. Whereas when they normally start out, it's about these characters being, attacked by or stalked by a killer. So that all sort of shifted as it went on. But in the first film, it was all about the characters. They were believable, and you enjoyed being with them. And I mean, when you look at the technical side of films, it is funny. They obviously couldn't afford a continuity person because there's so many little mistakes, which I didn't notice because it doesn't matter, because you are so engrossed in the stories and the characters and the atmosphere and everything that you don't sort of look at the little things. Whereas if you're bored or if film isn't working, you sort of get distracted and start looking at the little technical issues and stuff like that. So it took me until watching documentaries where people actually mentioned some of these mistakes for me to even realise they were there, which is a testament to the film itself and how powerful it is. And still to this day, I can watch the film after having watched it for decades, every year, and I can still engage with it and get the goosebumps and the fear of what's going to happen next. Like just watching it, the other night, I usually getting across from one house to another, and Tommy letting her in, and the wardrobe scene, and of course the scene after the wardrobe scene with Michael. They all work. Some of the other scenes don't, because once you sort of know what's happening, it doesn't sort of work as much. But I mean, Carpenter still does the atmosphere, and I think the disappointing thing about all of this is learning just how little Carpenter actually cared about the film. Really, he just saw it as something he was being paid to do, and I mean, he did his best to make it its best, but he didn't really care about it. And then when he had to come back and make a sequel, it was a nightmare for him, and he's resented the whole series ever since. And a lot of the issues with remaking it or going back to the original, or having him come back, has always been about that. So, but that's something that I will talk about in the review of the second film. But yeah, I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. I just wanted to share my thoughts on the film. I do love it. I saw it first when I was a kid, when I was probably maybe 10 or younger, maybe 8. And I have watched it pretty much every year. And it's not like Friday the 13th and Jason. It is different. Friday the 13th and Jason and Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street. Michael has no personality, and he doesn't really have a story. I mean, Jason had a story, what happened to him. Freddy had a personality. Michael had a history, but it was really just his legacy, the myth, the sort of idea of him as this shape and so forth. It's not really until later they actually look at him and try to explain how he came about, and that's all counterproductive. But I'm still talking. These were just supposed to be 5-minute videos, just sharing my thoughts on the film. So I'm going to go.